What maintains one vice would bring up two children. Remember, many a little makes a mickle. And farther, beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship. Benjamin Franklin. I would not have said it this way. The world is fortunate to have had the likes of Benjamin Franklin because, as eloquent as I am, my eloquence would have phrased this a different way. Clearly, by vice, he means addictive habit that has a detrimental effect, perhaps metabolically, but failing that, economically. It feels necessary at the time, and this feeling overrides reason. Clearly, this constitutes a form of bondage. What better form of bondage than one that is utterly effective, but that remains unrecognizable by masquerading as something else? Therefore, a rational person, under any circumstances, engages continuously in efforts to identify their vices and apply the resources available to them to the task of combating them, because the amount of money consumed by one vice is comparable to the amount of money it would take to provide a comfortable living for two children. Accordingly, one with an addiction and a continuous shortage of funds ought to consider a possible causal connection between the two that is probably well advised to seek counseling to combat it before asking anyone for financial help. This, however, is not a condemnation of the people who have these habits. My advice to these people is that they seek counseling to get rid of them before asking for any financial help, but otherwise, I have no advice here. No, this is a condemnation of the industries that thrive from fostering and nurturing these habits. Just consider nicotine specifically for a moment. It costs money. It raises one's risk for developing different forms of lung cancer, throat cancer, mouth cancer, and emphysema. It detracts from one's quality of life, and it shortens one's life. Ads for it tend to have something romanticized and glamorous, along the lines of a cowboy out on the prairie, but most smokers are never actually taken there when they light up. Yet this approach has a tendency to work just because nicotine is addictive. I would have raised two kids by now, but I can't afford to because of all the money that goes into ruining my health, shortening my life, and sustaining my addiction. This is one reason I did not look homeless when I was. I don't smoke, dip, or chew. I don't drink. Never in my life have I had any occasion to indulge in any drugs. But on a related note, I have experienced a lot of backwards, shoot oneself in the foot attitudes in this country toward the poor. We tend to see the poor as a drain on the economy. Many times have I gone into convenience stores with my food stamps and overheard condescending attitudes from the people who work there about the draining effects of people on food stamps. I mean, seriously? The people on food stamps who buy from you? People on food stamps who use those food stamps to bring you business are the people dragging you down? You want to take the food stamps away from those people so that we stop bringing you business? That's your way of fixing the problem? You did that arithmetic in grade school, right? Oh, wait, it was liberal arithmetic, wasn't it? I never have any money because the system keeps taking money from my paycheck to give to them for not contributing anything. First, a lot of the people in question have a sketchy employment history because they have trouble getting hired, because they have arrest records, because they have to steal the things they need to survive, because they have trouble surviving otherwise, because they have trouble finding funds, because they have trouble finding employment, because they have trouble getting hired, because they have arrest records. You see the cycle. There's a serious hole in this particular bucket. Second, how come the poor are always poor? If you keep finding yourself out of funds, it's not because the money that you had is just disappearing. It is because it is going somewhere. Well, you can be sure people who don't have money, by dint of that, don't have your money. If you see two parties, Party A and Party B, Party A has money and Party B is broke, and then Party A suddenly finds himself without money, but Party B is still broke, you can be sure Party B did not take it. So when Party A starts telling Party B to return it, you know that Party A is out of line. There are 50 states in the U.S. Of these, only Vermont, Illinois, and West Virginia are experiencing decreasing populations. In all the rest, the demand for rent is on the increase. In accordance, this is pushing up the price of rent. Now, I cannot speak for the rest of the country with any certainty, but my location is pretty progressive, and even here, every few months I see a news broadcast about how the rent is inching just a little higher. Now, I know just enough about economics to narrow this down to a combination of three factors. A possible, though puzzling if true, price floor imposed by local authorities, an increase in demand, and/or a decrease in supply. Of these, the second is the most plausible. That is, if the local population is increasing and the rent is increasing, that is probably the main reason. By the same token, prices can be lowered by a combination of just the opposite means: a price ceiling, a decrease in demand, and/or an increase in supply. Accordingly, I keep seeing efforts to curtail the demand. Bus stops in my area used to have benches with tops that were metal and perfectly smooth. Now, more and more, the tops are segmented with armrests or just places to sit. This resembles the local bus company being considerate of would-be passengers, but in fact they are doing this to make these stops less comfortable to sleep on. 24-hour laundromats are making it a point to lock the bathroom overnight. This and other such measures are being taken in an effort to decrease the demand for local housing by driving the local homeless elsewhere. But again, where exactly? If there are 50 states and 47 of them have increasing populations, this puts a tremendous burden on those remaining three. One can insist that they go to school and pick up some in-demand skills, but this is going to make them more competitive in a housing market that is already quite saturated. This is going to drive rent even higher. Never mind that a number of them actually cannot work. Why is everyone so determined not to consider the third option? Would it cost too much money? How come no one considers this when it comes to building another military base in the world? Military bases cost money. How come that is something we can always afford? If the United States can afford to support more than 800 military bases beyond our borders, we can afford to put roofs over the heads of the people we have on our streets. And no, I do not mean shelters, I mean homes. Not fancy homes, not luxurious or opulent homes, but homes. Places that are clean and in good repair, where people can stay warm in the winter and cool in the summer. I know this is not the current attitude, at least not in my location, because if it were, the local rent would be on its way down due to a steady increase in the availability of rental properties. Unfortunately, homeowners would be seeing the value of their homes decreasing as well But this would also be the result if the persistent efforts to make the streets more unpleasant to the end of drawing the homeless elsewhere were successful. For some reason, no one is objecting to that except the homeless. But let me talk a little about the attitude in my location. I live near Denver, Colorado. Not in Denver, mind you, but near it. Denver gets criticized frequently for having a lot of homeless people. But what is Denver supposed to do about them? Look at Denver's surroundings. Denver, as most outsiders are not aware, is alone in its county. It is the city and county of Denver. It should not be, but it is. It cannot expand north because it is blocked by Commerce City, which is in Adams County. Commerce City can expand north, but Denver cannot. It cannot expand south because it is blocked by Englewood, which is in Arapahoe County. Englewood, and by the same token Littleton and Centennial, can all expand south, but Denver cannot. It cannot expand east because it is blocked by Aurora, which is also in Arapahoe County. Aurora actually has quite a lot of room to expand east, but not Denver. It cannot expand west because it is blocked by Wheat Ridge, Edgewater, and Lakewood, which are all in Jefferson County. But I'm not clear on just how much room the three of these have to expand west. Sure, Denver has DIA in an area formerly belonging to Adams County, but otherwise, the only dimension remaining in which Denver has room to expand is upward, which is no doubt part of the reason why downtown Denver has so many skyscrapers. Would you like Denver to clear out all of these homeless people by building housing on top of existing buildings? Each of the cities around Denver has room to expand, with the possible exception of Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, and Edgewater, at least by zoning more acres for residential development, but not Denver itself. It could take some of its residential housing, bulldoze it, and build something with more stories, but otherwise, it's pretty packed. About a century ago, the United States got involved in the First World War. The global population at the time was about 2 billion. Now it's about 7.4 billion. In a century, the population of this planet has nearly quadrupled. Because one thing people do not need motivation to do is to reproduce. But where have we put all these people? Our capacity to house all these people in the world has increased as well. It would have had to. The infrastructure to house 2 billion is unquestionably inadequate to house 7.4 billion. It is clearly too simple to say that the difference between someone homeless and someone not homeless is that the person with a home is more motivated. There is no greater motivation than getting off the street. No, building housing requires more than motivation of those who hope to have a shelter. It also requires cooperation from all the people with the necessary authority to provide the raw materials, zone the real estate for residential development, and do the actual work. I read a lot of reviews about people shaming a location for having a lot of homeless people. Now, I agree with this sentiment. A location with a lot of homeless people should be ashamed of doing such a terrible job providing for them. Call me crazy, but being a citizen of a country that does such a wonderful job of massacre, but such a terrible job of providing, bothers me.